when you listen to someone talk, you ask a question and you really hear them, you're not only building a message to them that says, I see you, you're important, you're valuable, but you're also allowing them a safe place to process their own thoughts, because sometimes we need to get our thoughts out of our brains and through our mouth for us to actually have clarity. So oftentimes, even with my own kids, if I don't jump in and I just ask a question, open-ended question, how'd that make you feel? Or what are you thinking about? And they begin to talk, often if I just kind of let them have space, they'll get to it eventually. But you got to give that space. So the first thought is, it's not about me. My conversation is not about me walking away feeling great. My objective is that they walk away feeling great about the conversation. So you can provide more traditional forms of help later on if needed. So sometimes that means someone's asking you something and you think, I'd like to give them some advice. Well, actually, if you can pause, give them the encouragement, let them know that you're trustworthy, eventually you're going to have a moment where they'll say, what do you think? And you'll be able to give that to them. And that's really clear. Now, I'm not talking about people that never want to hear it. All they want to do is unload. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about regular, healthy conversations. Okay, number 2, let the other person set the topic. This is really key. My sister is the best conversationalist I've ever met. I mean, she can talk about the blue sky for 25 minutes. I'm like, I don't even know how you do it. Chit chat is hard for me. I'm one of those where if I don't see a purpose in the conversation, it kind of feels exhausting. Please don't judge me. I'm sure that you're way more spiritual than I am. But I've had to learn, after traveling with people and being on the road myself, I've had to learn to really cultivate conversation. So one thing I like to do is really ask somebody a question and let them kind of lead it. So if I say, what do you like to do around here? And then I like to do this, this, and this. Instead of me saying, well, what I like to do every day. No. I'll say, well, that's interesting. What made you interested in that? Or who do you take with you? Or how long has that been open? And you kind of let them direct the conversation, and you stay curious and you let them have space, and you don't pry, but you just ask some really good questions that allow them to lead it, but you're thinking about ways to expand what they just talked about. Very important. Let them set the topic. If it's not really obvious what he or she is struggling with, ask, what would you find helpful to talk through? So this is more about conflict. I'm talking about conversationally, but I think it's really important to say, is there anything that you're thinking about? Or when I travel, sometimes I'll say, so what is the meeting going to look like tonight? And they'll say, it's going to look like this. And I'm hoping they'll give me kind of a secret into their community so I can come serve them better. But often I'll say something like, what's one thing that you've been teaching your community this season? Or I might say something like, is there anything particularly you think that your community really needs to hear? And just begin to ask. So another thing you can do with anybody, is there something specifically you think that people miss in your line of work? Is there something you're really excited about that's coming up? And so that just helps bring it out instead of, not knowing what to say. It really is encouraging. Okay, the third one is don't interrupt, which is very important. And I am so guilty of this. I feel like I should have that button, like I'm the leader of this club, but not interrupting is very important, specifically if someone's trying to talk and they process slower than you. I do a lot of things where I just let them talk and have to bite my lip and just go, okay, if I interrupt, it's gonna hurt them and they're gonna have to start over. Specifically with guys sometimes. Okay, let them talk at length. Aim for at least 5 minutes. Isn't that unbelievable? Just watch the clock and think, I'm not going to interrupt for 1 minute. I'm just going to let them talk for 1 full minute. And control yourself. Don't be looking around and distracted. And we'll talk more about that, but really, really letting them talk without you having your thought all the time or without being interrupted. One thing I think sometimes is when we get interrupted by our phone or by our kids and sometimes we're just easily distracted, we actually are sending the message to the person, you're not important. So it's very important to, even if there's chaos happening, if you can lock in and say, I'm not going to interrupt or look distracted for 1 full minute, it's going to really encourage connection with that person, that particular person. Listen intently. Don't jump in. and make encouraging noises. I don't know, that sounds kind of funny, but make like, yes. I started using the word sure a lot because I didn't know what to say because I would say, yeah, yes, okay, yeah. So I started learning the word sure, yeah, sure. And I know that sounds funny, but even me learning a couple words that allow me to respond without closing it or saying, yeah, it can sometimes sound like I'm shutting it down. So sure. And that's been one of my words. Fourthly is to maintain eye contact. Now, my mother is a hero at this. People will say to me, now that I'm 40 years old, my mom, I have heard this on a regular basis my entire life. People will say, your mom makes me feel like I'm the only person in the room. Your mother is so good at being a good listener. And what my mom does is she locks eyes with the person and she just lovingly affirms and nods, but she just locks in. And even if somebody walks up to her, she said, I've intentionally purposed not to acknowledge them for interrupting, but just to look at that person. And even if that other person feels awkward, they need to realize that they're interrupting a conversation and that the person who's talking is very important. She's very good at this. Mom, I want to be like you. So maintain eye contact. Remember too, even I've done studies with guys, boys and girls and sons and daughters. Boys, actually, when there's conflict, have a tendency to look away. So for a boy, them looking away isn't a sign of disrespect. It's actually a sign that they're processing, and it's a sign of power. So they have a tendency to look away. Women look right at you. So again, you'll have to kind of figure out who you're talking to, but make sure, and don't be that weird person that locks eyes and can't look away. That's going to be a little strange. I'm just talking about, in general, locking eyes and staying present and responsive.